Whew. Hey, hey, hey. It's Alex in the flesh. What's going on, guys? Today I got a pretty interesting story that I think will excite you all. Before we get into the video, I have over 400 plushies so far that are waiting for you to buy. Link in the description below. A scientist spilled 2 organic mercury drops on her hand. This is what happened to her brain. Karen Wetterhan, born in October 1948. She was born in Plattsburgh, New York. Karen is a 48-year-old woman who works at Dartmouth College, is going to the emergency room, and cannot control her balance or her speech. She tells the nurse that she has lost 15 pounds, which is 6.8 kilograms, over the last 2 months, and that she has several long moments of abdominal discomfort and nausea. Karen's career was a chemistry professor. Her job was to research toxic metal exposure in order to understand it better. She was one of the leading experts in this type of research, and very few could compete with her in terms of subject matter of working with known toxic substances like organic mercury. She recalls a few months ago that she was transferring liquid dimethyl mercury from a container and dropped 2 drops on the backside of the glove, but she was adamant that she did not touch any of the toxic metal. And dimethyl mercury means organic mercury. Within a few weeks after the incident, she would occasionally run into the wall and just think that she wasn't paying attention. She would almost cause car accidents, and she eventually had her husband drive her to the university, thinking that maybe she's just overstressed, or maybe she didn't get enough sleep the night prior, or is just heavily distracted by, real life events, right? A little to her knowledge, she was suffering more and more, unknowingly, that she had been poisoned by organic mercury. She began to suffer from upper extremity dementia, which means that she was not able to move her arms very well, and they were not coordinating with her brain properly. She was finding it very difficult to walk correctly and was imbalanced. Her speech was impaired, and all of this was pointing in the direction of being exposed to organic mercury. And when people started to talk to her, she just wouldn't respond. Can you imagine all of a sudden you just start to lose vision, hearing, going in and out of consciousness, losing your ability to drive, and you feel like you're going pretty much insane at that point, right? And not to make matters worse, but you have no idea what's happening to you. A blood test reveals that she has over 4,000 times the amount of mercury in her body compared to the normal person. This was the only proof that anything had happened to her, and the doctors needed to understand what had happened to determine how to potentially help her. Normally, just 2 drops of normal mercury would have been about 100 times the normal amount that would have caused any kind of issues in her body, let alone it doesn't absorb very well through the skin. But because this is organic mercury, it caused so much more and was able to penetrate through the skin. This kind of mercury is really good at attaching itself to organs in the body, unlike normal mercury. And this is really, really important for the story later. So now that we determined what the medical issue was, there are several questions that the doctors have to ask. Is there a way to remove the mercury from her body? Is there a way to get her body to attack the mercury in her body and then render it useless and just non-toxic? Is there a way for her body to extract it through sweat or going to the bathroom? Is there a way to get her body to digest the mercury in her body? Is there a way to surgically remove the mercury from her body? And is there a way to get you to subscribe to the channel? Well, mercury is unable to be passed outside of your body from the liver, so the liver just allows it to resonate in your body. And the liver is mainly responsible for moving things inside of your bloodstream. And this is really important, so I'll have to go over it later. So the doctors tried to figure out ways to get the mercury out of her body. We first looked at potentially going to the bathroom to get it out of your body, right? And they decided that they could give her some medication to have water molecules surrounding the mercury, and then the liver would deliver that water, which has mercury in it, outside of the body when she went to the bathroom. So long story short, the liver will deliver. Is that where the word deliver comes from? Or is that where the word liver comes from? Anyway, so the doctors wanted the mercury to be delivered by the liver, so that way she could go to the bathroom and get the mercury out of her system that way. She's given medication to trap the mercury in a water form, and then her urine mercury levels were jumping about 160 times the next day, meaning that a lot of the mercury is starting to finally pass out of her system. But her case seems to worsen as time goes on. You would think, less mercury in her system equals signs of recovery, right? Well, they didn't exactly check every single organ, and they were just chasing, the laboratory levels, what can be tested. Most doctors aren't going to know how organic mercury functions in the body, so it takes time for anybody to come up with anything. So you guys remember how I said that the liver is just removing mercury from her blood? It's not removing it from her organs. So as a doctor, you would need to understand where those mercury levels are coming from, right? And they look more closely at the brain and can see the deterioration of her brain as well as all the nerves in her body, and the body just starting to shut down altogether. Upon further investigation, the doctor shines a light in her eye to see if the eye reflects and becomes smaller. Uh, in most cases, most people are immediately affected by it, and the pupil does get smaller. In Karen's case, her eye becomes smaller at a much, much slower rate than normal, meaning that there is some sort of damage in the brain. Just being 4,000 times higher than the upper limit of mercury is enough for it to be lethal. And it happened a few months ago, which means she's probably 2 to 4 times more than the lethal amount to kill you. After further investigation, it turns out that organic mercury does, in fact, pass through gloves that she was wearing, and nobody realized this because it had never been tested before. It's very common for most diseases and infections to have some sort of incubation period, a period where no symptoms are really shown. And because of the time period, people often confuse it with current events that are happening. I personally can relate to at least being confused on how my nerve disease took place. This part is more of a personal story and not really related to Mercury, just to be clear. I do want to finish the story, but my story has some sort of relevance to it, which is why I want to talk to you about it. And it's very difficult to determine something when you don't know what it is. So back in July 2013, I worked at Fry's Food and Drug, which is a food and drug store similar to Kroger and Walmart. And I was a cashier trying to get moved up into management into the corporate world, right? And I was closing the store. I was helping employees close and do their random everyday activities. And I pretty much just did what other managers told me to do. Unfortunately, during this process, I was verbally abused by lower management and, being constantly scolded and humiliated in front of my peers to the point of breaking down for days. And this kind of stress, as well as this kind of amount of stress, caused me to have severe nerve issues to the point where my nerves are actually going haywire. And I just remember crying, for many days after work, uh, you know, over a stupid minimum wage job, thinking that I would just get fired all the time. When I did cashiering, I would try to scan, and my hand would keep going like this. And sometimes I would scan it twice or 3 times on accident. And of course, I have to apologize to the customer, for not only wasting their time, but, I just feel bad, right? And of course, everybody else felt bad, probably much worse than me, because I'm sitting here struggling to do basic moving item from left to right, or I guess right to left. I noticed these nerve issues were starting in about July of 2013, and in August of 2013, I quit. My feet started to cave in, and my arms were pretty much moving out of control at this point. And as I rested at home, my body seemed to be very, very weird. I was personally very happy about the situation, and I was able to quit my job, and I was completely at bliss at my own house, with little to no kind of pressure whatsoever. I lived with my mother at the time, and she was able to take care of all my needs. And my nerve issue just continued to deteriorate between August and December. And I would just have so much trouble walking and so much trouble going to the bathroom, crawling, and I even rolled a few times because I couldn't crawl anymore to the bathroom. And the bathroom is just right across the hallway. And I don't know if you guys can tell, but I'm 6'2", and I'm a pretty decent sized guy, right? So you could just imagine me, rolling across my apartment floor at the time, and it's kind of humiliating when you're, 18 years old. But it was a very serious situation to me at the time. Um, Especially when nobody was home to help me. Um, Sometimes I would prioritize, dehydrating myself, just so that way I wouldn't have to walk to the kitchen or stumble across the kitchen or roll myself across the kitchen, and just to grab a cold water and come back. And it was a lot of pain. It was definitely not my best moment at all. And my mother's soon to be husband administrated me to the hospital, and we talked with plenty of doctors to try to figure out something. And the reason why he came was he's a doctor himself, so he's able to kind of channel a little bit or talk with the doctors and see if they can change their route to be more efficient. Eventually, the several doctors I came to, we did many tests, and we came down to four conclusions. There was a disc in my back that was slightly twisted, more than normal. Uh, Perhaps this was causing the nerve issues in my legs, and it was pinching a nerve. Simply wouldn't explain what's happening to my arms, since the nerves go from your head down and then shoot through your legs and then come back up. It wouldn't go through my arms. So we did some more tests, and then the third to last conclusion that they came up with was something that was wrong with my brain, and they couldn't really figure it out, and they were not willing to risk their medical licenses to determine what it was or what it can do. And then the last two conclusions were that I had a combination of two diseases. They knew it was disease B for sure, and then they could not determine if it was A or C. So there was a combination of B and C or A and B. I don't really remember the names of the diseases. I know some people are going to give me hate for that, and oh, you're not showing any proof. I'm sorry, I don't have any. The doctors just refused to service me due to the inability to diagnose what I had, and they just gave me pain pills and a handicap plaque. And the worse that my condition got, the worse that I was just kind of just accept this is the truth and just move on. And it got really bad up until December 2013, 4 months later after I quit my job. And at this point, I'm pretty much unable to get out of my bed. At the age of 18, I'm just really scared that I'm just going to live like a potato eventually. I felt like there was nothing else left for me to do, and maybe just perhaps get a at-home call center job. Making minimum wage and pretty much just slaving my life away. Disability assistance from the government refused to help me because I could not get an official diagnosis for my problem. And people outside of my family, even some family members at this point, simply didn't believe my situation at all. And it was just too out of the norm. Nobody could diagnose anything, and if the government wouldn't supply you with disability, then why should I support you? Is kind of the mentality of that a lot of people were telling me pretty much. Some people thought I was just suffering from a psychological or a self-inflicted pain from my job. And my supporters wanted to help me, and unfortunately most of them broke and they weren't able to help me too much. And still to this day, I am undiagnosed. As of March 2014, I started to see that my disease was lessening its death grip. I was able to somewhat walk again. I was able to go to the bathroom with ease, able to go to the kitchen by holding onto the wall and chairs and pour myself a glass of water and actually enjoy it. You know what I mean? And I was able to start to do basic survival everyday activities in my own home. And this feeling was absolutely amazing. You know, I still cannot fathom what it is. It's almost like your life was given back to you by God Himself because you don't know what is going on. Just 2 months ago, I was thinking I was going to be bedbound. 2 months ago, I thought I was going to be living with my mother for the rest of my life. And instead of me taking care of her when she gets old, she's going to be taking care of me, regardless of what my age was. And, a year goes by after quitting my job, and I notice I can go to the grocery store again and get in those electric wheelchairs to go shopping. And then about 2 years later, after quitting, I notice that I'm able to move things around and start, actually working out for more than just 5 minutes. I know it doesn't look like a workout because I don't. 5 years later, after quitting, I noticed that I was able to go to the grocery store without the use of an electric wheelchair, and I haven't used one for more than about 6 months now. I currently still have pain, when I do too much around the house or when I'm doing too many chores at once, and I still have to rely on ibuprofen to get through the day sometimes. I do hope that, I don't become reliant on ibuprofen for the rest of my life, but I think it's not a bad option, seeing that how much I've gone through. And the conclusion and reason why I'm telling you this story is that I came up with a theory of mine on why all this happened. And it was these stress levels from working at Fry's. And it didn't dawn to me how much I was actually being verbally abused until I talked to some people about it. My stress levels were at an all-time high between July and August, and I felt like I was trapped. I felt like I couldn't do anything about it, and I felt like this was my destiny at the time. And, when you're 18, sometimes you don't know any better, right? You're just getting into the real world for the first time and trying to get some job experience and letting yourself know, if I can't do it now, what makes you think I can't do it later? Going from probably the most stressful time of my life all the way to the most 100% blissful relaxation kind of lifestyle uh, is probably a dramatic experience for my body. And the symptoms of the stress continued until about December, and my body almost nearly gave up after 4 months of quitting. So I kind of want to go back to Karen's story. Um, so it took Karen a total of 2 months to notice any kind of symptoms, and she would just kind of write it off as common issues, which could be lack of sleep, it could be just I'm not paying attention, or slowly having to stop for her speech, and all of a sudden she's starting to get vision problems and having hearing issues and shutting down her nerves. At this time, there's only been 3 documented deaths in history with organic mercury, and the first 2 deaths were in the 1860s when the people who were studying it were exposed while testing it unsafely, and they died several weeks later. And another one in the 1960s when somebody suffered pretty much the same neurological decline as Karen. In your lifetime, you most likely won't come in contact with organic mercury like Karen did, due to it pretty much being inaccessible to 99.999% of people. And the doctors examined her brain, and she had about 6 times the lethal amount in her brain. And she started to have vegetative withdrawals from extreme agitation, and her brain would refuse to register pain. So now we're at 8 months after being exposed to organic mercury. They finally took her off of life support and were just unable to save her. So after her death, chemists are required to wear plastic laminate gloves in order to prevent accidents like this from occurring when handling mercury. It is also a requirement that any kind of accidents occur to immediately seek medical help for any kind of chemical. Her name will not go in vain, and she was awarded annually by the National Institute of Environmental Health Science. And organic mercury has been highly discouraged as any kind of use just because of how toxic it is to humans. So that is it for today's story. I really appreciate that you guys got to the very end of it. Please subscribe. Again, I have plenty of these kind of plushies available for you guys in store. While ad rates are about 70% less than they are right now. I really appreciate it if you go check it out. And thank you guys for everything. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye. Just being 4,000 times over the upper limit of Mercury is enough just to be lethal. And especially if this happened a few months ago, it would mean she's 2 to 4 times more exposed to it, meaning that she was 2 to 4 times more likely to die. Jesus Christ. Just being 4,000 times more likely. Oh my gosh. Just being 4,000 times higher than the upper limit of Mercury is enough to be lethal. And if it was just a few months ago when she's... Karen is a 40-year-old. Is there a way to surgically remove the mercury from her body? And is there a way that... And is there a way to get you to sub... Oh my gosh. And is there a way to get you... And is there a way to get you to subscribe to the channel?